Sergeant Castellanos barely glanced up from his clipboard when she approached the armory window. "You want what now?" His voice carried that particular tone reserved for requests he considered beneath his time. The Barrett M82A1 and the Schmidt and Bender scope, she repeated, her voice steady despite the growing audience of soldiers behind her. Castellanos set down his pen with deliberate slowness, finally looking at her properly. His eyebrows raised in theatrical disbelief. The armory fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. 3 soldiers waiting in line behind her exchanged glances, one shaking his head with a barely suppressed grin. "Lady, that rifle weighs 30 pounds, Castellanos said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You sure you can even lift it?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a training exercise, acrid and lingering. Before we continue with this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've served or have family in the military where you're from. She stood her ground at the counter, watching Castellanos flip through equipment sheets with exaggerated care. Behind her, she could hear whispered conversations starting up. Private Torres leaned toward his buddy and muttered, "50 cal? Really?" His companion chuckled and shook his head. "That thing kicks like a mule. She'll be on her back after the first shot." The morning sun slanted through the armory's small windows, casting harsh shadows across rows of weapon racks. This was Fort Braxton's main equipment center, where serious soldiers came for serious hardware. Not the place for unrealistic requests or amateur hour, as Castellanos liked to remind anyone who would listen. He prided himself on knowing exactly which soldiers could handle which equipment, and his assessment rarely changed once formed. "You understand this isn't a hunting rifle, right?" Castellanos continued, his tone now approaching condescension. "This is precision equipment for specialized operations." He emphasized each word as if speaking to a child. "We don't just hand out 50 caliber rifles to anyone who asks nicely." The soldiers behind her were no longer trying to hide their amusement. Someone coughed to cover a laugh. She had expected this reaction. In her 2 months at Fort Braxton, she had learned that respect came slowly and skepticism came free. Her service record was clean, her qualifications current, but she was new to this base, and unfamiliar faces always had to prove themselves. The difference was that most soldiers started with smaller requests, working their way up to the serious equipment. She needed to skip that gradual process. The Barrett M82A1 sat in its rack 20 feet away, a massive presence among the other rifles. 50 caliber, semi-automatic, capable of effective ranges beyond 2,000 meters. It was the kind of weapon that demanded respect from both user and target. Castellanos followed her gaze and shook his head with theatrical disappointment. "Listen, sweetheart," he said, the endearment dripping with false concern. "Why don't you start with something more your speed? Maybe an M4? Nice and light, easy to handle." He gestured toward the carbine section with a patronizing smile. "Work your way up to the big boy toys, you know." The suggestion drew quiet chuckle from the growing audience of soldiers. Private Martinez had joined Torres and his friend, creating a small cluster of entertainment seekers. "She's serious about the Barrett," Martinez whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "This should be interesting." His tone suggested he was already preparing to witness an inevitable disaster. The requisition form lay on the counter between her and Castellanos, still blank except for her name and unit designation. Standard protocol required his signature for any weapon checkout, but his pen remained firmly in his shirt pocket. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, studying her with the expression of someone solving a particularly simple puzzle. "You know what the qualification requirements are for that rifle?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer would be insufficient. "Advanced marksmanship certification, specialized training documentation, unit commander approval." He ticked off each requirement on his fingers. "Plus, you need a spotter qualified for long-range operations. Can't just walk in here solo and expect to check out sniper equipment." She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a folder, setting it on the counter with quiet confidence. Castellanos eyed it suspiciously before opening it. His expression shifted slightly as he scanned the first page, then the second. The documents were authentic, properly stamped, and current. Advanced marksmanship certification, specialized training completion certificates, and a temporary duty assignment letter with all necessary approvals. While Castellanos said slowly, his confidence wavering for the first time, these look legitimate. But his voice carried a new edge of uncertainty. Behind her, the whispered conversations had stopped as the audience sensed a shift in the dynamic. The morning light had moved across the armory floor, now illuminating the weapon racks where the Barrett waited. "Still doesn't mean you can handle it," Torres muttered from the growing crowd. "Papers are one thing. Actually using a 50 cal is something else entirely." His comment drew nods of agreement from his companions. They had seen soldiers with impressive credentials fail spectacularly when faced with equipment beyond their actual capabilities. Castellanos closed the folder and looked at her again, his assessment now more careful and less dismissive. The paperwork changed the situation from an obvious rejection to a more complex evaluation. Regiment policy required him to honor legitimate requisitions, but his professional instincts still screamed warning signals about the mismatch between the soldier before him and the weapon she requested. The armory door opened with a metallic clang as two more soldiers entered, immediately sensing the tension and joining the informal audience. Word was spreading through the building that something interesting was happening at the main counter. Sergeant Castellanos was known for his entertaining rejections of unrealistic equipment requests, and soldiers often gathered to watch the show. "All right," he said finally, his voice carrying resignation mixed with skepticism. "Paperwork checks out, but understand something." He leaned forward across the counter, his voice dropping to ensure she could hear every word. "That rifle has ended careers. Good soldiers, experienced marksmen, reduced to laughingstocks because they thought they could handle equipment beyond their capabilities. I've seen it happen more times than I care to count." The warning carried genuine concern beneath its condescending delivery. Castellanos had indeed witnessed spectacular failures, soldiers whose confidence exceeded their abilities and paid the price in professional embarrassment. The Barrett M82A1 was unforgiving equipment that amplified both skill and inadequacy with equal precision. She met his gaze without flinching, her expression calm and patient. Around her, the audience of soldiers waited for her response, some already composing the stories they would tell about the soldier who thought she could handle a 50 caliber rifle. The morning sun continued its journey across the armory windows, and somewhere in the distance, the sounds of training exercises echoed across the base. Castellanos drummed his fingers on the counter, still processing the legitimate paperwork spread before him. The certificates bore official seals from Advanced Infantry School and the Army Marksmanship Unit, documents that should have settled the matter immediately. Instead, they seemed to deepen his confusion. "Where exactly did you complete this training?" he asked, squinting at the signatures as if they might reveal some hidden flaw. "Fort Benning," she replied simply. The response drew a snort from Private Torres behind her. "Everyone claims Fort Benning," he whispered to Martinez. "Half the wannabes in the Army name drop that place like it means something." His comment earned quiet chuckles from the small crowd that had gathered around the armory counter. Castellanos continued examining the documents with the intensity of a detective studying evidence. The training dates showed completion just 8 months ago, recent enough to be current, but old enough to suggest some experience. Still, something felt wrong to him. Young soldiers with impressive paperwork but questionable field experience were a constant source of problems in his armory. The Barrett M82A1 remained in its rack across the room, seeming to grow larger and more intimidating as the conversation continued. Corporal Hayes had joined the audience and leaned against a nearby wall, arms crossed. 50 cal isn't a beginner's weapon, he announced to no one in particular. That thing will teach you respect real quick. One way or another. You understand the liability issues here? Castellanos asked, setting the paperwork aside. If something goes wrong on the range, if there's an accident or equipment damage, that comes back on me. He gestured around the armory with proprietary concern. I don't hand out premium equipment to unknowns, regardless of what their paperwork says. The morning was advancing, and other soldiers were beginning to queue up behind the growing crowd of spectators. Staff Sergeant Chun approached the counter with his own requisition form, took one look at the situation, and settled in to watch the entertainment. Word was spreading that Castellanos was dealing with an interesting case, the kind of situation that would be discussed in the mess hall for days. "Look, sweetheart," Castellanos said, returning to his patronizing tone, "why don't you prove yourself with something smaller first? Show me you can handle a standard sniper rifle, maybe the M24, then we can talk about upgrading to the serious equipment." His suggestion was presented as reasonable compromise, but his expression made clear he expected her to recognize the wisdom and accept gracefully. Behind her, Private Rodriguez had materialized from somewhere and joined the informal audience. He whispered to Torres, barely bothering to lower his voice. $20 says she can't even shoulder that rifle properly. The Barrett's got a kick that'll put her flat on her back. Torres grinned and nodded agreement. "Easy money," he replied. She stood quietly during this exchange, neither defending herself nor accepting Castellanos' alternative suggestion. Her patience seemed to frustrate him more than arguments would have. He was accustomed to soldiers who either backed down immediately or became belligerent when challenged. Her calm persistence fell outside his usual categories. The Schmidt and Bender scope she had requested sat in a lock case near the premium optics section, a piece of equipment worth more than most soldiers' monthly salary. Castellanos followed her gaze and shook his head with renewed skepticism. "You even know how to zero that scope?" he asked. "Because if you mess up the calibration, that's weeks of work to get it right again." Corporal Hayes pushed off from the wall where he had been leaning. "I've used that exact scope setup," he announced with authority. "Takes serious skill to get the most out of it. Not something you learn from a manual." His comment was clearly intended to support Castellanos' position while demonstrating his own expertise to the gathered audience. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh illumination across the armory's organized chaos of weapon racks and equipment cases. This was Castellanos' domain, where his word was law and his assessments rarely questioned. Soldiers learned quickly that arguing with him was counterproductive. Better to accept his judgment and work gradually toward earning access to better equipment. Martinez stepped closer to the counter, apparently unable to contain his curiosity. "What do you even need a Barrett for?" he asked directly. "Training exercise? Competition shooting?" His tone suggested he genuinely couldn't imagine a legitimate scenario that would require such equipment from someone of her apparent experience level. "Special assignment," she replied, offering no additional details. The vague response drew eye rolls from several spectators. Torres laughed outright. "Special assignment," he repeated mockingly. "That's what they all say when they can't explain their gear requests. Probably wants to take photos with it for social media." Castellanos seized on this skepticism like a lifeline. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about," he said, gesturing toward Torres approvingly. "Soldiers thinking big equipment makes them look impressive. This isn't a photo opportunity. This is serious military hardware that requires serious justification." Staff Sergeant Chun cleared his throat impatiently from his position in the growing line. "Some of us have actual work to do," he pointed out, though his tone suggested he was enjoying the entertainment as much as anyone. Castellanos waved him off. "This won't take much longer," he promised, then turned back to face her with renewed determination. "Final answer," he said, straightening to his full height behind the counter. "Start with standard equipment, prove yourself on the range, build up some credibility. Then, maybe, in a few months, we can revisit this conversation." His tone indicated the matter was settled, and he began reaching for his stamp to mark her requisition as denied. The audience of soldiers seemed to sense the approaching conclusion of the show. Hayes nodded approvingly at Castellanos' decision. Rodriguez was already calculating his potential winnings from the bet he had proposed to Torres. Martinez checked his watch, probably estimating how much time remained before he needed to report for his next duty assignment. Around them, the armory continued its daily rhythm of equipment checkout and return, soldiers coming and going with their approved requisitions. The morning sun had shifted again, now directly illuminating the premium weapons section where the Barrett M82A1 waited in its rack, massive and imposing among the other rifles. She watched Castellanos prepare to deny her request, her expression unchanged throughout the entire exchange. The paperwork remained spread across the counter between them, legitimate and properly executed, yet somehow insufficient to overcome his professional skepticism. Behind her, the small crowd of spectators waited to witness the inevitable conclusion of another armory entertainment session. Castellanos paused with his denial stamp halfway to the requisition form as footsteps echoed from the armory's rear entrance. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison appeared from behind the equipment racks, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. The gathered soldiers straightened slightly, though none moved to disperse. Morrison's reputation for fairness made him popular among enlisted personnel, but his unexpected appearance complicated Castellanos' situation. "What seems to be the problem here, Sergeant?" Morrison asked, approaching the counter with casual authority. His tone carried genuine curiosity rather than accusation. But Castellanos suddenly found himself explaining rather than deciding. "Well, sir, we have a requisition for premium equipment from a soldier I'm not familiar with. The Barrett and high-end optics, sir." Morrison glanced at the paperwork spread across the counter, then at her, his expression thoughtful. The crowd of spectators had grown noticeably quieter with an officer present, though Torres still whispered to Martinez, "This should be interesting. Even the LTC can't change physics. That rifle's going to knock her down." "Legitimate paperwork?" Morrison asked Castellanos, who nodded reluctantly. "Yes, sir. Everything appears to be in order. Advanced certifications, proper authorizations. But, sir, with respect, paperwork doesn't always reflect actual capability. I've seen too many soldiers get hurt trying to use equipment beyond their experience level." Behind her, Private Rodriguez leaned toward Hayes and muttered, "LTC's being polite, but he knows what's going to happen. No way someone her size handles a Barrett properly." Hayes nodded agreement, adding, "Officers got to let her try, though. Can't deny legitimate requests without cause." Morrison studied the certificates more carefully than Castellanos had, his eyes tracking the official seals and signatures with practiced attention. "Fort Benning Advanced Marksmanship Course," he read aloud. "Army Marksmanship Unit Qualification. These are serious credentials." He looked up at Castellanos with mild surprise. "Why the hesitation, Sergeant?" Castellanos shifted uncomfortably under the officer's scrutiny. "Sir, it's not about the paperwork. It's about practical application. That rifle requires significant physical strength, advanced technical knowledge, and extensive experience. I'm responsible for equipment safety in this armory, and I have concerns about issuing premium weapons to soldiers whose capabilities I can't verify." The lieutenant colonel nodded slowly, understanding Castellanos' position while recognizing the complexity of the situation. Military protocol required honoring legitimate requisitions, but equipment safety remained a valid concern. The Barrett M82A1 represented serious firepower that demanded respect and skill from its user. Martinez stepped forward slightly, emboldened by the officer's presence. "Sir, if I may, that's a .50 caliber rifle. Most experienced marksmen need extensive preparation before attempting to use one effectively. The weight alone is 30 pounds, and the recoil can cause serious injury if not handled properly." Morrison acknowledged Martinez's comment with a slight nod. "Valid points, Private. However," he said, returning his attention to the paperwork, "these certifications specifically cover heavy caliber weapons. The training documentation indicates familiarity with the Barrett system." His observation carried subtle weight, suggesting the credentials should be respected. Staff Sergeant Chun had grown tired of waiting and approached the counter with obvious impatience. "Sir, with respect, some of us have scheduled range time that requires equipment checkout. This conversation could continue elsewhere if necessary." His suggestion carried the practical wisdom of someone managing multiple competing priorities. Castellanos seized on Chen's intervention as potential support. "Exactly my point, sir. I have dozens of soldiers depending on timely equipment access. I can't spend extended time evaluating questionable requests when there are legitimate needs waiting. His argument attempted to frame the situation as resource management rather than capability assessment. She remained silent during this exchange, watching the debate unfold around her, without contributing to either side. Her patience seemed to unsettle Castellanos more than arguments would have. Most soldiers either became defensive when challenged or accepted his judgment gracefully. Her calm persistence suggested a confidence that he found difficult to understand. Torres whispered to his growing audience, "Look how quiet she is. That's not confidence. That's someone who knows they're in over their head, but too stubborn to admit it." Rodriguez chuckled and added, "We'll see how quiet she stays when that rifle kicks back. Might not be able to talk at all afterward." Morrison examined the scope specifications on her requisition form with interest. Schmidt and Bender 312 by 50, he noted. Premium optics for precision work. That suggests serious long-range applications. He looked at her directly for the first time. "What's the intended use for this equipment setup?" "Training exercise, sir," she replied simply. The brief response frustrated Castellanos, who had hoped for more detailed explanation that might reveal inexperience or unrealistic expectations. Instead, her economy of words suggested professional focus rather than uncertainty. Hayes crossed his arms and shook his head with theatrical skepticism. "Training exercise," he repeated loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's military speak for, I want to try the big guns. Seen 100 times. Soldiers thinking they can handle equipment they've only read about in manuals." Lieutenant Colonel Morrison seemed less convinced by the skepticism surrounding him. Military training often involved progressive skill development, but exceptional circumstances sometimes required accelerated access to advanced equipment. The proper documentation suggested legitimate need rather than casual interest. Castellanos attempted one final argument. "Sir, even if the paperwork is legitimate, I recommend starting with standard sniper equipment and building up gradually. The M24 system would provide excellent training opportunities while minimizing risk. We could revisit the Barrett request after demonstrated proficiency with simpler equipment." The morning sun had continued its arc across the armory windows, now casting long shadows between the weapon racks. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher in contrast, highlighting the tension that had developed around the seemingly simple equipment request. Other soldiers had begun gathering near the entrance, drawn by word that something unusual was happening at the main counter. Private Martinez checked his watch again and muttered to Torres, "How long does it take to say no to an impossible request? Even with an officer watching, this is still going to end the same way." Torres nodded agreement, adding, "LTC's just being diplomatic. Can't embarrass a soldier in front of everyone, but the answer's obvious." Morrison folded the paperwork carefully and handed it back to her. "The requisition appears to be in order," he said to Castellanos. "Military protocol requires honoring legitimate requests unless there are specific safety violations or regulatory concerns. Do you have documented reasons for denial beyond general skepticism?" Castellanos found himself caught between his professional instincts and regulatory requirements. Morrison's question essentially demanded objective justification rather than subjective assessment. The paperwork was legitimate, the authorizations current, and the soldier had committed no violations that would warrant equipment restriction. The audience of soldiers sensed the approaching resolution of the standoff, though the outcome remained uncertain. Hayes and Rodriguez continued their whispered commentary about inevitable failure, while Chen tapped his foot impatiently and checked his own paperwork. The morning's entertainment was approaching its conclusion, one way or another. Castellanos set his denial stamp aside with visible reluctance, understanding that Morrison's presence had effectively ended his ability to refuse the requisition based on personal judgment alone. "Very well, sir," he said, his voice carrying resignation mixed with professional concern. "I'll process the equipment checkout, but I want it documented that I expressed reservations about this assignment." Morrison nodded understanding. "Your concerns are noted, Sergeant." Professional caution is always appropriate with premium equipment. However, proper documentation and authorization must take precedence over subjective assessment. His words carried the weight of regulation while acknowledging Castellanos' position. The gathered soldiers watched this exchange with growing anticipation. Torres leaned toward Martinez and whispered, "Here we go. This is where it gets interesting. She's actually going to try using that monster." Martinez grinned and shook his head. Should have taken the LTC suggestion about starting smaller. Pride comes before the fall. Castellanos walked toward the Barrett's rack with deliberate slowness, each step seeming to emphasize his disapproval of the situation. The rifle appeared massive, even mounted securely among the other weapons, its distinctive profile commanding attention from across the armory. Several soldiers had never seen one removed from storage, adding to the sense of occasion. Private Rodriguez nudged Hayes and pointed toward the approaching transaction. $20, says she can't even carry it to the checkout counter properly, he whispered. Hayes considered the bet seriously before nodding agreement. Easy money, he replied. That thing weighs more than most soldiers' full combat load. The Barrett M82A1 came free from its rack with a metallic click that echoed through the suddenly quiet armory. Castellanos handled the weapon with practiced ease, demonstrating the proper respect and technique required for such equipment. As he returned to the counter, the rifle's size became even more apparent, dwarfing standard infantry weapons. She watched Castellanos approach with the Barrett, her expression remaining calm despite the obvious weight and complexity of the weapon system. Behind her, the audience of skeptical soldiers had grown to nearly a dozen, word having spread through the building that something unprecedented was happening at the main armory counter. Staff Sergeant Chin finally received Morrison's attention for his own equipment needs, but even he continued glancing toward the Barrett transaction with obvious curiosity. Been here 8 years, he commented to no one in particular, and I've never seen anyone that size request a 50 cal. This should be educational for everyone involved. Castellanos set the rifle carefully on the counter, its impressive length extending well beyond the normal checkout area. There's your Barrett, he announced with theatrical resignation. 30 pounds of precision engineering that requires serious respect. He gestured toward the weapon with the expression of someone presenting evidence in a court case. The Schmidt and Bender scope came next, removed from its protective case with equal ceremony. Castellanos held the optics up to catch the light, showing off the precision glass and complex adjustment mechanisms. Premium optics for precision work, he said, echoing Morrison's earlier comment. Hope you understand the calibration requirements, because this isn't point-and-shoot equipment. Torres stepped closer to get a better view of the massive rifle, his skepticism becoming more vocal. Look at the size of that muzzle brake, he announced to his companions. That's going to create a blast wave that'll knock over everything within 10 feet. She better hope there's nothing breakable on the range when she fires that thing. Morrison observed the proceedings with professional interest, noting both Castellanos' continued resistance and the gathered crowd's obvious expectations of failure. Military culture often involved testing new personnel, but the level of skepticism seemed unusually intense for a routine equipment checkout. Private Martinez approached the counter and examined the Barrett with obvious fascination. Never seen one up close before, he admitted to Castellanos. That's serious firepower. How many soldiers on base are actually qualified to use something like this? His question carried genuine curiosity mixed with implied doubt about current qualifications. Less than you might think, Castellanos replied, seizing the opportunity to reinforce his position. Advanced marksmanship certification is one thing. Actually demonstrating proficiency with 50 caliber equipment is something entirely different. That's why I prefer gradual progression through weapon systems rather than jumping straight to premium equipment. She began examining the Barrett's controls and mechanisms with quiet focus, her hands moving across the weapon with apparent familiarity. The action caught Morrison's attention, who watched her inspection with growing interest. Several soldiers noted her apparent comfort with the equipment, though Torres dismissed it as overconfidence. Anyone can handle a rifle when it's not loaded, Torres announced loudly. Real test comes when you're trying to manage 30 pounds of recoil while maintaining accuracy. That's when amateur hour shows itself real quick. His comment drew nods of agreement from the surrounding audience. Hayes moved closer to observe her examination of the scope mounting system. She's checking the rail alignment, he noted with surprise. Most soldiers don't even know to look for that. Rodriguez shrugged dismissively. Probably read about it online. Reading and doing are two different things entirely. Castellanos completed the paperwork with obvious reluctance. Each signature and stamp applied with theatrical emphasis on the documentation requirements. Equipment condition noted as excellent, he announced. Any damage during use will be charged to the requesting soldier's account. He slid the clipboard toward her for final signature. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison prepared to leave, satisfied that proper protocol was being followed despite the controversy. Sergeant Castellanos, he said formally, ensure this soldier receives any necessary range support for her training exercise. Professional courtesy should extend to all legitimate equipment users regardless of personal reservations. The morning sun had moved again, now illuminating the checkout counter where the Barrett lay waiting. Its massive presence seemed to dominate the armory's space, drawing attention from every soldier present. Several had pulled out phones to document the unusual transaction, anticipating entertainment value from the upcoming range session. Private Rodriguez checked his watch and grinned at Hayes. Range opens in 30 minutes, he noted. Should we head over early to get good seats for the show? Hayes laughed and nodded enthusiasm. Wouldn't miss this for anything. Been waiting all morning to see how this plays out. Martinez approached her directly as she signed the final paperwork. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, where exactly are you planning to use this equipment? The main range isn't set up for 50 caliber weapons. You'll need the long-range facility, and that requires special scheduling. His questions seemed helpful on the surface, but carried undertones of additional complications. She completed her signature and looked up at Martinez with calm patience. Range 7, she replied simply. Already scheduled for this afternoon. The brief response indicated advanced planning that surprised several listeners, who had assumed her request was spontaneous rather than carefully prepared. Castellanos handed over the final documentation with visible reluctance. Equipment checkout complete, he announced. Range safety regulations require spotter assistance for all 50 caliber operations. Hope you have someone qualified lined up, because I'm not releasing this weapon for solo use regardless of what your paperwork says. The armory doors swung shut behind her as she carried the Barrett M82-01 toward the transport vehicle, the rifle's case weighing heavily across her shoulder. Word of the unusual equipment checkout had already begun spreading through Fort Braxton's communication networks, carried by the soldiers who had witnessed the morning's entertainment. By noon, half the base would know about the soldier who thought she could handle a 50 caliber rifle. Corporal Hayes jogged to catch up with Torres and Martinez as they headed toward the mess hall. You guys going to range 7 this afternoon? He asked, though his grin suggested he already knew the answer. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Torres replied. Been waiting all morning to see how this disaster unfolds. Should be more entertaining than cable television. The dining facility buzzed with unusual energy as word continued spreading about the afternoon's anticipated entertainment. Sergeant First Class Williams approached their table with obvious curiosity. Heard someone checked out the Barrett today, he said, settling into an empty chair. That true? Or just another base rumor? Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. Saw it myself. Small female soldier, new to the base. Thinks she can handle 50 caliber equipment. Williams whistled low and shook his head with disbelief. Barrett M82A1? He asked for confirmation. That's not beginner equipment. That's serious long-range precision hardware for experienced operators only. What was Castellanos thinking when he approved that requisition? Martinez explained about Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's intervention and the legitimate paperwork that had forced the equipment release. The conversation drew attention from nearby tables as other soldiers overheard fragments about the Barrett checkout. Staff Sergeant Kumar leaned over from the adjacent table. Someone actually got Castellanos to release the 50 cal? He asked with genuine surprise. That man guards premium equipment like it's his personal property. Must have been some seriously compelling paperwork. Private Thompson joined the growing discussion with obvious excitement. What time is this supposed to happen? He asked. Range 7, right? Because I've got maintenance duty this afternoon, but I might find a way to take a break if the timing works out. The prospect of witnessing potential disaster was proving irresistible to soldiers across multiple units. Torres checked his watch and calculated timing. Range session starts at 1400 hours, he announced. Gives us time to finish lunch and get over there early for good viewing positions. Rodriguez added, should bring cameras too. This is definitely going to be worth documenting for posterity. The dining facility's noise level had increased noticeably as conversations about the afternoon's entertainment spread from table to table. Soldiers who had missed the morning's armory drama were receiving detailed second-hand accounts, each retelling adding embellishments about the weapon's intimidating size and the obvious mismatch between equipment and user. Sergeant Davis approached their table with skeptical interest. Heard there's going to be some kind of shooting demonstration this afternoon, he said. Someone trying to prove they can handle equipment they've never used before. Hayes nodded confirmation. New soldier thinks she can master a Barrett on her first attempt. Davis laughed and shook his head. Pride before the fall, he observed. Seen it happen too many times to count. Master Sergeant Jackson entered the dining facility and immediately sensed the unusual energy in the room. What's got everyone so excited? He asked the nearest table. Private Foster explained about the morning's equipment checkout and the anticipated afternoon demonstration. Jackson's expression grew serious as he processed the information. 50 caliber rifle? Jackson repeated with concern. That's specialized equipment requiring extensive safety protocols. Who's providing spotter support and range oversight? The question highlighted practical concerns that most soldiers hadn't considered in their excitement about potential entertainment. Martinez admitted that safety arrangements remained unclear. She mentioned having range time scheduled, he said, but didn't specify who would be providing support services. Castellanos seemed concerned about solo operation, but the paperwork was apparently in order for the equipment release. Jackson frowned at this information. Range 7 requires qualified supervision for all heavy caliber operations, he stated with authority. Can't just show up with a Barrett and start shooting without proper protocols. Someone needs to verify that appropriate safety measures are in place before this afternoon. The mention of safety protocols dampened some enthusiasm among the gathered soldiers, who had been anticipating entertainment rather than considering practical requirements. Torres looked disappointed. Think they'll cancel the whole thing? He asked. Would hate to miss out on this after all the build-up. Staff Sergeant Chun entered the dining facility and immediately noticed the animated conversations throughout the room. What's the excitement about? He asked, approaching Jackson's table. The Master Sergeant explained about the equipment checkout and safety concerns, his tone carrying professional worry rather than entertainment anticipation. Chun nodded understanding. Saw part of that transaction this morning, he confirmed. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison was involved, which suggests legitimate military business rather than recreational shooting. Maybe there's more to this situation than obvious appearances suggest. His observation introduced possibility that had occurred to few other soldiers. Private Rodriguez dismissed Chen's suggestion with confident skepticism. Doesn't matter who authorized it, he said. Physics is physics. 30 pounds of rifle plus 50 caliber recoil equals inevitable disaster. Been around weapons long enough to know when someone's attempting something beyond their capabilities. Hayes agreed enthusiastically. Exactly right, he said. All the paperwork in the world doesn't change the fact that equipment has physical requirements. That Barrett's going to teach some serious lessons about respecting advanced weaponry. The prediction drew nods of agreement from most listeners. Williams checked the dining facility clock and noted the advancing time. Couple hours until showtime, he observed. Should probably start heading toward range 7 soon if we want decent viewing positions. Torres and Martinez began planning their afternoon logistics, coordinating break times to ensure attendance at the anticipated demonstration. The dining facility's energy continued building as more soldiers learned about the afternoon's planned entertainment. Conversations at every table seemed to focus on predictions about spectacular failure and discussions of previous disasters involving soldiers attempting to use equipment beyond their experience levels. Master Sergeant Jackson remained concerned about safety protocols and proper supervision. "Think I'll head over to range control," he announced. "Make sure appropriate oversight is arranged for this afternoon. Can't have soldiers treating .50 caliber demonstrations like entertainment events without proper precautions in place." As lunch period approached its end, soldiers began dispersing toward their afternoon duties with unusual anticipation. Most had made arrangements to visit Range 7 during the scheduled session, drawn by curiosity about the outcome of morning's controversial equipment checkout. The base's communication network had ensured that nearly everyone knew about the unusual situation. Private Thompson gathered his lunch tray and checked his watch one final time. 1400 hours, Range 7, he confirmed with his companions. "See everyone there for what promises to be the most interesting afternoon Fort Braxton has seen in months." The sentiment was shared by soldiers throughout the dining facility. Range 7 stretched across the northern edge of Fort Braxton like a carefully engineered amphitheater of concrete and steel, designed specifically for long-range precision shooting and heavy-caliber weapons testing. The afternoon sun cast sharp shadows across the firing positions, highlighting the substantial construction required to contain .50 caliber operations safely. Range Control Sergeant Peterson emerged from the concrete bunker that served as the facility's command center, clipboard in hand and expression serious. He had received Master Sergeant Jackson's call about safety concerns and had spent the past hour reviewing protocols for Barrett M82A1 operations. The weapon system required specific precautions that many soldiers didn't fully understand. She arrived 30 minutes before her scheduled session, the Barrett case slung across her shoulder and additional equipment bags distributed for balance. The sight drew immediate attention from the range maintenance crew, who had been preparing the facility for afternoon operations. Corporal Mason paused his target setup work to watch her approach the check-in station. "That's some serious hardware," Mason commented to his partner, Private Lewis. "Haven't seen anyone request Range 7 for Barrett operations in months. Most soldiers stick to standard sniper rifles for training exercises." Lewis nodded agreement while continuing his equipment inspection. "Hope she knows what she's getting into," he replied. "That rifle doesn't forgive mistakes." Peterson approached her position with professional concern evident in his demeanor. "Ma'am, I understand you have Barrett operations scheduled for this afternoon," he said formally. "I need to verify safety protocols and support personnel before authorizing range use. .50 caliber weapons require specific oversight that I'm responsible for ensuring." She set down her equipment cases and produced documentation from her jacket pocket, handing Peterson a folder similar to the one that had convinced Castellanos earlier. The range control sergeant examined the paperwork carefully, noting authorizations and safety certifications that seemed comprehensive and current. Meanwhile, soldiers had begun gathering at the observation area behind the firing line, drawn by word that had spread throughout the base about the unusual demonstration. Torres and Martinez arrived first, claiming positions with optimal viewing angles. Hayes and Rodriguez followed closely, bringing folding chairs they had borrowed from the recreation center. "This is better than cable television," Torres announced as he settled into his observation position. "Front row seats to watch someone learn why the Barrett M82A1 isn't beginner equipment." Martinez unpacked snacks he had brought from the commissary, treating the occasion like outdoor entertainment. Private Thompson arrived with several soldiers from his maintenance unit, all having arranged brief breaks from their afternoon duties. The gathering crowd created an informal audience that made Peterson increasingly uncomfortable. Range operations weren't typically spectator events, but stopping soldiers from observing legal training exercises exceeded his authority. Staff Sergeant Williams approached Peterson directly with safety concerns. "Sergeant, shouldn't there be additional oversight for this type of operation?" he asked. Barrett demonstrations usually involve multiple qualified personnel and extensive safety briefings. This seems more casual than appropriate for 50 caliber weapons. Peterson shared Williams's concerns, but found himself constrained by proper paperwork and legitimate authorizations. The documentation appeared comprehensive, including safety certifications and range authorization signatures. Military protocol required honoring legitimate requests unless specific violations could be identified. She began unpacking her equipment with methodical precision, each component removed and arranged according to a parent system rather than random placement. The Barrett case opened to reveal foam-fitted compartments holding the massive rifle and its components. The Schmidt and Bender scope emerged from its protective housing like precision jewelry. Corporal Mason watched her equipment setup with growing interest. "She knows the gear," he commented to Lewis. "Look how she's handling the scope mounting. That's not amateur hour technique." Lewis observed her work while maintaining skeptical reserve. Handling equipment properly and actually using it effectively are different things entirely. The observation area continued filling with curious soldiers as word spread about the approaching demonstration. Sergeant Davis arrived with his squad, all having found reasons to visit Range 7 during their afternoon training period. The informal audience now numbered nearly 20 soldiers, creating an unusual atmosphere for routine range operations. Private Rodriguez had brought binoculars for detailed observation of the anticipated disaster. "Going to want close-up views when this goes sideways," he explained to Hayes. "That Barrett's going to provide some serious education about respecting advanced weaponry." Hayes nodded agreement while adjusting his own viewing equipment. Peterson completed his documentation review and approached her position with reluctant authorization. "Paperwork appears to be in order," he announced formally. "However, I'm implementing additional safety protocols given the weapon system and current conditions. All personnel will maintain positions behind the safety line, and operations will cease immediately if any unsafe conditions develop." Master Sergeant Jackson arrived at Range 7 just as Peterson was completing his safety briefing. The senior NCO surveyed the gathered crowd with obvious concern before approaching the range control sergeant. "This many observers for a training exercise?" he asked. "That seems unusual for routine weapons familiarization." Peterson explained the morning's events and the legitimate authorizations that had led to the current situation. Jackson examined the gathered soldiers with professional assessment, noting the entertainment expectations evident in their positioning and equipment. The atmosphere suggested spectacle rather than serious military training. She completed her rifle assembly with practiced efficiency, the Barrett M82A1 taking shape as a formidable precision instrument. The massive muzzle brake commanded attention from everyone present, its engineering designed to manage recoil forces that could overwhelm unprepared shooters. Several soldiers photographed the weapon setup with their phones. Staff Sergeant Chun arrived with additional personnel from his unit, having heard about the demonstration during afternoon formation. The crowd now exceeded 30 soldiers, creating an unprecedented audience for Range 7 operations. Peterson found himself managing crowd control in addition to his safety responsibilities. Torres checked his watch and noted the approaching session time. 1400 hours, he announced to his companions. "Showtime approaches. Hope everyone brought cameras, because this is going to be memorable." The anticipation among gathered soldiers had reached fever pitch as the moment of truth approached. The Barrett M82A1 lay completed on the shooting mat, its impressive length and bulk dwarfing standard infantry weapons. The Schmidt and Bender scope added technical complexity that emphasized the system's precision capabilities. Everything appeared professional and properly configured, which only increased the audience's anticipation of spectacular failure. Range safety flags hung limp in the still afternoon air, indicating calm conditions for precision shooting. The distant targets waited at measured intervals, designed to challenge even experienced marksmen using advanced equipment. Peterson made final preparations for what promised to be the most observed range session in Fort Braxton's recent history. Peterson activated the range loudspeaker system and cleared his throat for the mandatory safety briefing that preceded all live fire exercises. Range 7 is now hot, he announced, his voice echoing across the facility. All personnel will maintain positions behind the designated safety line. 50 caliber operations are now commencing under control conditions. The gathered audience of soldiers settled into their observation positions with barely contained excitement. Torres adjusted his folding chair for optimal viewing angle, while Martinez distributed the snacks he had brought from the commissary. "This is definitely the most entertainment Fort Braxton has provided in months," Torres commented loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. She approached the firing position with the Barrett M82, a one cradled professionally across her arms, the rifle's 30-pound weight distributed properly to avoid strain or awkward handling. Several soldiers noted her apparent comfort with the massive weapon, though Rodriguez dismissed it as overconfidence that would soon be corrected by physics. "Look at how she's carrying that thing," Rodriguez whispered to Hayes, "acting like it weighs nothing. That's going to change real quick when she tries to shoulder it for actual shooting. The Barrett's going to teach her some serious respect for advanced weaponry." Hayes nodded agreement, while raising his binoculars for detailed observation. Private Lewis had positioned himself near the firing line to observe technical aspects of the demonstration. From his vantage point, he could see her approach to equipment setup and shooting preparation. "She's following proper procedures," he noted with surprise. Most soldiers rush through the setup when they're nervous about using unfamiliar equipment. Master Sergeant Jackson maintained his position near Peterson, ready to intervene if safety concerns developed during the exercise. The size of the audience troubled him professionally, but the legitimate authorizations and proper protocols left little room for interference. Military training sometimes attracted observers, though rarely in such numbers. She settled into the prone position behind the Barrett with fluid precision, her body alignment suggesting familiarity with heavy rifle systems. The movement caught Corporal Mason's attention as he observed from the maintenance area. "That's not beginner technique," he commented to Lewis. "She knows how to position herself for recoil management." Staff Sergeant Williams had brought his entire squad to observe the demonstration, positioning them for educational purposes rather than entertainment. "Watch her shooting stance," he instructed his soldiers. "Regardless of outcome, you can learn proper technique from observing experienced procedures." His comments suggested professional respect rather than skeptical amusement. The Schmidt and Bender scope required careful adjustment for range conditions and target distance. She worked through the calibration process with methodical attention to detail, each adjustment made with deliberate precision. Several soldiers noted the technical competence displayed during scope preparation. Torres checked his watch impatiently and called out to his companions. "How long does it take to line up one shot?" he asked rhetorically. "All this preparation for what's going to be over in 2 seconds when that rifle knocks her flat." Martinez laughed and agreed. "Been waiting all afternoon for this moment of truth." Peterson monitored wind conditions and target status from his control position, ensuring all safety requirements remained satisfied before authorizing live fire. Range conditions appeared optimal for precision shooting, with minimal wind and excellent visibility. The afternoon sun provided clear target illumination without creating problematic shadows. Private Thompson had convinced his maintenance supervisor to approve extended break time for observing the demonstration. Educational opportunity, he had argued, though his real motivation involved witnessing potential disaster. The supervisor had agreed, curious himself about the unusual range session that had attracted base-wide attention. She completed her scope adjustments and settled into final firing position, the Barrett's bipod legs providing stable support on the concrete shooting surface. Her breathing pattern became controlled and regular, indicating transition into precision shooting mindset. The technical preparation impressed several observing soldiers despite their skeptical expectations. Hayes focused his binoculars on her shooting position and noted details that surprised him. Body position's actually correct, he admitted reluctantly to Rodriguez. She's not making the obvious mistakes most soldiers attempt when trying equipment beyond their experience. Rodriguez shrugged dismissively. Setup's one thing. Managing recoil's completely different. Staff Sergeant Chun arrived at the last moment with additional personnel from his unit, bringing the total audience to nearly 40 soldiers. The unprecedented crowd created an atmosphere more suited to sporting events than military training exercises. Peterson found himself managing crowd control while maintaining focus on safety oversight. The Barrett M82A1 dominated her position like a piece of artillery, its massive proportions emphasizing the power contained within the precision weapon system. The muzzle brake pointed downrange toward targets positioned at measured distances, ready to demonstrate the rifle's long-range capabilities under control conditions. Range 7 had fallen unusually quiet as soldiers focused their attention on the approaching moment of truth. Conversations ceased as anticipation reached peak levels among the gathered observers. Cameras were raised and positioned for optimal documentation of what most expected would be spectacular failure. Master Sergeant Jackson performed final safety verification, ensuring all personnel remained properly positioned behind designated safety lines. The crowd size exceeded normal parameters for training exercises, but proper protocols had been followed and legitimate authorizations honored. Military regulations supported the soldiers' right to use approved equipment. She took several controlled breaths while settling into final shooting position, her eye approaching the Schmidt and Bender scope with professional technique. The moment that had captured base-wide attention was finally arriving, with dozens of skeptical soldiers ready to witness confirmation of their predictions about inevitable disaster. Peterson raised his range control microphone for the final authorization that would begin live fire operations. Firing line, "You're cleared hot," he announced formally. "All safety protocols are in effect." The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the gathered audience as the moment they had been anticipating all afternoon finally arrived. Torres gripped his chair arms with anticipation while Martinez stopped chewing his snacks to focus complete attention on the firing position. Hayes adjusted his binoculars for maximum magnification while Rodriguez prepared his camera to document the approaching educational moment about respecting advanced military weaponry. The afternoon sun cast perfect lighting across Range 7 as the most observed shooting exercise in Fort Braxton's recent history prepared to commence. 40 skeptical soldiers waited to witness confirmation that some equipment remained beyond the capabilities of soldiers who lacked appropriate experience and physical conditioning. The Barrett M82A1's trigger required precise pressure application, and she applied it with a deliberate control that separated trained marksmen from casual shooters. The massive rifle's firing pin struck the .50 caliber cartridge with mechanical precision, igniting propellant that would drive the projectile downrange at velocities exceeding 2,800 feet per second. The explosion that followed exceeded every expectation the gathered soldiers had formed about .50 caliber weapons. The muzzle blast created a concussive wave that struck the observation area with physical force, rattling equipment and causing several unprepared soldiers to step backward involuntarily. Torres felt the pressure wave against his chest and grabbed his chair arms for stability. What immediately captured everyone's attention, however, was not the spectacular recoil they had anticipated watching flatten an overconfident soldier. Instead, she absorbed the Barrett's tremendous energy with practiced technique, her body position maintaining stability while the rifle cycled smoothly through its semi-automatic operation. The weapon settled back in a battery position, ready for follow-up shots. Hayes lowered his binoculars with confusion evident on his face. "That's not what I expected to see," he admitted to Rodriguez. "She just handled 30 pounds of recoil like it was standard equipment." Rodriguez stared at the firing position with growing uncertainty. "Maybe she got lucky with the first shot," he suggested weakly. Peterson observed the demonstration from his control position with professional interest rather than entertainment anticipation. The soldier had demonstrated textbook technique for managing heavy-caliber weapons, her body mechanics suggesting extensive training rather than beginner's luck. His safety concerns were rapidly diminishing as competence became evident. Private Lewis abandoned his maintenance duties to focus complete attention on the unexpected technical demonstration. She's not just surviving the recoil, he called the Mason. She's controlling it like an experienced operator. That's advanced marksmanship technique, not amateur hour attempts at using unfamiliar equipment. The target downrange showed unmistakable evidence of precision impact, the .50 caliber projectile having struck within the designated scoring area at a distance that challenged even experienced marksmen. Through spotting scopes, soldiers could observe the clean hole that indicated accurate shot placement rather than random luck. Martinez had stopped eating his snacks entirely. His attention focused on the firing position where she was already preparing for a second shot. "This isn't going according to plan," he whispered to Torres. "That was supposed to be a disaster, not a demonstration of competence." Torres nodded slowly, his entertainment expectations rapidly being replaced by confusion. Master Sergeant Jackson approached Peterson's control position with growing professional interest. "Range control, what's the target assessment?" he asked formally. That appeared to be a precision hit rather than the learning experience everyone expected to witness. Peterson consulted his spotting scope and confirmed the accurate impact. Staff Sergeant Williams seized the educational opportunity for his squad members. "Watch your technique," he instructed his soldiers. "That's how you manage recoil from heavy weapons systems. Body position, breathing control, proper follow-through. She's demonstrating textbook procedures that you should study and remember." She cycled the Barrett's bolts smoothly and settled into position for her second shot, the rifle's operation flowing with mechanical precision under her experienced handling. The sight drew increasingly respectful attention from soldiers who had expected to witness spectacular failure rather than professional competence. Private Thompson found himself documenting impressive marksmanship rather than the disaster he had anticipated. His camera captured smooth weapon handling and controlled shooting technique that contradicted every prediction made about the afternoon's demonstration. The footage would tell a very different story than anyone had expected. Rodriguez attempted to maintain his skeptical position despite accumulating evidence. "2 shots doesn't prove anything," he announced to nearby soldiers. "Wait until she tries rapid fire or extended shooting sessions. That's when inexperience shows itself and technique breaks down under pressure." The second shot produced another controlled explosion, followed by the same professional recoil management that had surprised everyone during the first round. She absorbed the Barrett's energy efficiently while maintaining target alignment, the rifle settling smoothly back in a firing position without disturbing her shooting stance. Hayes raised his binoculars again to observe target impact, expecting to see degraded accuracy as the demonstration continued. Instead, the spotting scope revealed another precision hit within the target's scoring rings. "That's 2 for 2, he announced with grudging respect. "She's actually hitting what she's aiming at." Corporal Mason had joined Lewis in observing technical aspects of the demonstration. "Look at her bolt manipulation," he noted with professional appreciation. "Smooth and efficient, no wasted motion. That's not luck or beginner's technique. She's got serious training with this weapon system." Staff Sergeant Shun found his earlier skepticism evaporating as professional competence became undeniable. "Maybe there's more to this situation than obvious appearances suggested," he admitted to his unit members. "Those credentials from this morning might actually reflect legitimate capability rather than inflated paperwork." The gathering of 40 soldiers had grown noticeably quieter as entertainment expectations gave way to technical appreciation. Conversations shifted from predictions of disaster to observations about impressive marksmanship. Several soldiers began questioning their earlier assumptions about the demonstrator's experience and qualifications. Peterson made notes in his range log about the professional demonstration he was observing rather than the safety incident he had been prepared to manage. The soldier was displaying advanced technique that exceeded most personnel's capabilities with 50 caliber weapons. His safety concerns had been replaced by professional respect. She prepared for a third shot with the same methodical precision that had characterized her earlier performance. The Barrett M82A1 responding to her handling like a familiar tool rather than challenging equipment. The sights suggested extensive experience rather than first-time usage of advanced weaponry. Torres exchanged uncertain glances with Martinez as their afternoon entertainment transformed into something entirely different from expected. "This was supposed to be a disaster," Torres muttered. "Instead, we're watching someone who actually knows what they're doing with that rifle." Master Sergeant Jackson approached the firing line for closer observation of technique that was impressing experienced soldiers throughout the gathered audience. The demonstration had evolved from anticipated failure into unexpected education about advanced marksmanship capabilities. Professional competence was becoming increasingly evident with each controlled shot. The Barrett's third discharge echoed across range 7 with the same controlled power that had characterized the previous rounds, followed immediately by the smooth recoil management that had surprised every observer. She maintained her shooting position with unwavering stability while the massive rifle cycled through its mechanical operation. Private Lewis called out the target assessment with growing amazement. 3 shots. 3 hits, he announced to the gathered soldiers. Center mass grouping at long range. That's not beginner's luck. That's professional-level marksmanship with advanced equipment. The observation sent murmurs of recognition through the previously skeptical audience. Word of the unexpected demonstration had begun spreading beyond Range 7 as soldiers used their phones to contact friends and colleagues across Fort Braxton. Staff Sergeant Kumar received a text message from Hayes describing professional marksmanship rather than the anticipated disaster. "You need to get over here," the message read. "This isn't what anyone expected to see." She transitioned smoothly into rapid fire sequence. The Barrett M82A1 cycling through its semi-automatic operation with mechanical precision under her experienced control. Each shot followed the previous one, with measured timing that demonstrated familiarity with the weapon's capabilities rather than tentative experimentation with unfamiliar equipment. Rodriguez found himself abandoning his skeptical commentary as evidence mounted that contradicted every assumption he had made. "That's 4 consecutive hits," he announced to Hayes with genuine bewilderment. "At this range, with that weapon system, under these conditions, most qualified marksmen would struggle to maintain that accuracy." Private Thompson had shifted from documenting anticipated failure to recording impressive marksmanship demonstration that would serve as training material rather than entertainment. His camera captured smooth weapon handling and consistent shot placement that suggested extensive training with 50 caliber systems. Master Sergeant Jackson approached Peterson's control position with questions about the soldier's background and credentials. "Range control," he said formally. "Do you have additional information about this operator's qualifications? Because what we're observing exceeds standard advanced marksmanship training." Peterson consulted the documentation folder she had provided earlier, finding certificates and authorizations that now carried different significance given the demonstrated competence. Advanced individual training completion, specialized weapons course graduation, multiple qualification badges for precision shooting disciplines. The paperwork suddenly seemed less questionable. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison appeared at the range entrance, drawn by reports filtering through the base communication network about unusual demonstrations at Range 7. His arrival drew immediate attention from the gathered soldiers, who straightened slightly while maintaining their observation positions. "What's the situation here?" Morrison asked Peterson directly. "Reports reaching my office suggest some kind of exceptional shooting demonstration." The range control sergeant explained the morning's equipment checkout and the professional competence being displayed rather than the safety incident everyone had anticipated. She paused between shots to adjust her scope for changing light conditions. The technical modification performed with practiced efficiency that impressed observing soldiers. Corporal Mason noted the professional approach to equipment management. "She's treating that scope like precision instrument," he commented to Lewis. That's advanced operator technique. Torres found his entertainment expectations completely overturned by the professional demonstration he was witnessing. This is nothing like what I expected, he admitted to Martinez. We came here to watch someone learn hard lessons about respecting advanced equipment. Instead, we're watching someone who obviously knows exactly what they're doing. The Barrett's fifth shot echoed across the range with the same controlled authority that had characterized every previous round, followed immediately by the smooth recoil management that had surprised everyone present. Target assessment confirmed another precision hit within the designated scoring area. Staff Sergeant Williams gathered his squad members for an impromptu training discussion about the techniques they were observing. Notice her breathing pattern, he instructed. Controlled respiration between shots, proper trigger discipline, consistent follow-through. This is textbook advanced marksmanship that you should study and emulate. Private Lewis called out target assessment with growing professional respect. 5 shots, 5 hits, all within scoring rings, he announced. That's not luck or beginner success. That's systematic precision shooting with advanced equipment. The observation drew nods of acknowledgement from experienced soldiers throughout the audience. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison positioned himself for optimal observation of the continuing demonstration, his expression shifting from curious concern to professional interest. The reports reaching his office had understated the level of competence being displayed. This appeared to be advanced operator capability rather than routine training exercise. Rodriguez attempted one final skeptical observation despite mounting evidence. Maybe she's just having a good day, he suggested to Hayes. Everyone gets lucky sometimes, even with equipment beyond their normal capabilities. Hayes shook his head slowly. 5 consecutive precision hits isn't luck. That's skill and training. She transitioned into shooting positions that tested different aspects of the Barrett's capabilities, moving from prone to supported kneeling while maintaining consistent accuracy. The position changes demonstrated versatility with the weapon system that exceeded basic qualification requirements. Master Sergeant Jackson found himself revising his earlier assessments about the soldier's background and experience. The demonstration suggested training levels that weren't immediately apparent from her appearance or unit assignment. Advanced marksmanship capability typically required extensive, specialized education. Staff Sergeant Chun approached Morrison's position with growing recognition that the situation involved more than initial appearances had suggested. Sir, he said respectfully, this level of competence with 50 caliber systems usually indicates specialized training background. Most soldiers never achieve this proficiency with advanced weapons. The gathered audience had grown substantially as word spread about the unexpected demonstration, with soldiers arriving from various base locations to witness the professional marksmanship being displayed. The crowd now exceeded 50 personnel, creating an unprecedented assembly for Range 7 operations. Peterson maintained his range control responsibilities while observing technique that impressed his professional standards. The soldier was demonstrating advanced capabilities that exceeded most personnel's qualifications with specialized equipment. His earlier safety concerns had been replaced by technical appreciation. She completed her 6th shot with the same control precision that had characterized every previous round, the Barrett responding to her handling like familiar equipment rather than challenging weaponry. Target assessment confirmed continued accuracy despite the extended shooting sequence. Private Thompson documented shooting technique that would serve as excellent training material for less experienced personnel. His footage captured professional weapon handling and consistent accuracy that demonstrated advanced marksmanship principles. The afternoon had provided unexpected educational value. Hayes lowered his binoculars with complete revision of his earlier skepticism. 6 for 6, all precision hits, he announced to the gathered soldiers. This isn't someone attempting to use equipment beyond their capabilities. This is someone demonstrating mastery of advanced systems. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's presence had added official weight to the observations being made about exceptional competence. His interest suggested recognition that the demonstration involved capabilities worthy of command attention rather than routine training activities that typically occurred at Range 7. Torres found himself questioning every assumption he had made about the morning's equipment checkout and the soldiers' qualifications. "We completely misjudged this situation," he admitted to Martinez. "She obviously has extensive training with these weapon systems that wasn't immediately apparent." The Barrett M82A1 had performed flawlessly under her experienced operation, each shot demonstrating the precision capabilities that made .50 caliber rifles valuable for specialized applications. The weapon system was responding to professional handling that maximized its technical potential. Master Sergeant Jackson prepared to approach the firing line for direct conversation with the operator whose capabilities had impressed every observer. The demonstration had revealed training levels that warranted investigation and recognition rather than the skepticism that had characterized earlier reactions. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached Peterson's control position with questions that reflected growing command interest in the exceptional demonstration occurring at Range 7. "Sergeant," he said formally, "I need complete documentation about this operator's credentials and training background. The level of competence being displayed warrants official investigation." Peterson produced the folder containing her certifications and authorizations, documents that now carried significantly different weight given the professional marksmanship being witnessed. "Advanced Individual Training Honors Graduate," Morrison read aloud. "Specialized Weapons Course Distinction. Multiple precision shooting qualifications from the Army Marksmanship Unit." The continuing demonstration had drawn attention from across Fort Braxton as word spread through communication networks about unprecedented shooting accuracy being displayed with .50 caliber equipment. Soldiers were arriving from distant units, creating the largest audience Range 7 had ever accommodated for a training exercise. She transitioned into extreme range shooting, engaging targets positioned at distances that challenged even the Barrett's impressive capabilities. The shots required advanced ballistic calculations and environmental compensation that exceeded basic marksmanship training. Each round demonstrated technical knowledge that impressed experienced observers. Master Sergeant Jackson consulted with Morrison about the implications of the demonstrated capabilities. "Sir, this level of proficiency typically indicates specialized unit assignment or advanced training programs that aren't readily apparent from standard personnel records. We might be dealing with someone whose background involves classified operations." Rodriguez had completely abandoned his skeptical commentary, instead focusing on technical aspects of the marksmanship being displayed. "Look at how she's compensating for wind drift at that range," he noted to Hayes. "That requires advanced ballistic knowledge that most soldiers never acquire. This is specialized operator capability." Private Thompson's documentation had evolved into training material that would benefit marksmen throughout the installation. His footage captured techniques that demonstrated principles taught in advanced shooting schools, but rarely observed in routine training environments. The demonstration provided exceptional educational value. Staff Sergeant Williams gathered additional personnel for impromptu instruction about the professional techniques being observed. "Notice her environmental assessment before each shot," he explained to his expanded audience. "Wind reading, light evaluation, ballistic compensation. That's graduate-level marksmanship application." The Barrett's seventh shot struck its distant target with the same precision that had characterized every previous round, confirming accuracy at ranges that exceeded most soldiers' capabilities with any weapon system. Target assessment through spotting scopes revealed continued shot placement within scoring areas despite challenging distances. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's radio crackled with inquiries from other command personnel who had received reports about the unusual demonstration. Base operations wanted confirmation about the exceptional shooting being reported from Range 7. The situation was drawing attention throughout Fort Braxton's leadership structure. Torres found himself completely revising his understanding of the morning's events at the armory. Castellanos wasn't being unreasonable when he questioned her request, he admitted to Martinez. He just didn't recognize the level of training she actually possessed. Her credentials were legitimate, after all. Staff Sergeant Chun approached Morrison with observations about command implications of the demonstrated capabilities. Sir, this soldier obviously possesses training that exceeds standard infantry qualifications. Her background might involve specialized programs that warrant security considerations rather than routine personnel management. She paused between shots to make technical adjustments to her scope settings, the modifications performed with expertise that impressed observing soldiers familiar with precision shooting requirements. Corporal Mason noted the professional approach to equipment optimization under changing environmental conditions. Private Lewis documented target assessment that confirmed continuing accuracy despite increasingly challenging shooting conditions. 8 shots, 8 hits, all at extreme range, he announced to the gathered audience. That's not standard military training. That's specialized operator capability. The gathered crowd had grown to nearly 70 soldiers as word continued spreading about the exceptional marksmanship being demonstrated. Personnel from maintenance, logistics, communications, and combat units had found reasons to visit Range 7 during the unprecedented shooting exhibition. Master Sergeant Jackson received radio contact from the base commander's office requesting detailed reports about the situation at Range 7. Command interest was escalating as reports filtered through the installation about exceptional shooting capabilities being displayed during routine training operations. Morrison consulted additional documentation from Peterson's files, finding training records that suggested backgrounds not immediately apparent from standard personnel databases. Specialized schools, advanced courses, qualification programs that indicated extensive investment in marksmanship development. The credentials were becoming more impressive as he examined details. Hayes had transitioned from skeptical observer to professional student, studying techniques that exceeded his own training level. Her scope management between shots is textbook advanced procedure, he noted to Rodriguez. That's graduate school marksmanship that most soldiers never encounter during their entire careers. The Barrett's 8th shot demonstrated the same controlled precision that had characterized every previous round, confirming sustained accuracy under extended shooting conditions. The weapon system was performing flawlessly under her experienced operation, each discharge showcasing the rifle's technical capabilities. Staff Sergeant Williams expanded his impromptu training session to include soldiers from multiple units who had arrived to observe the demonstration. Watch her post-shot procedures, he instructed. Immediate assessment, environmental reevaluation, systematic preparation for follow-up engagement. That's advanced tactical shooting protocol. Peterson maintained detailed range logs documenting the exceptional performance being witnessed, records that would provide official confirmation of the capabilities being displayed. His documentation would serve as evidence of training levels that exceeded routine personnel qualifications. Private Thompson's footage had captured nearly 30 minutes of professional marksmanship that would serve as premier training material for less experienced personnel. The demonstration provided textbook examples of advanced techniques that were rarely observed outside specialized training environments. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison prepared to make direct contact with the operator whose capabilities had drawn command attention throughout Fort Braxton. The demonstration had revealed training levels that warranted investigation and recognition rather than the routine oversight typically provided for range operations. Rodriguez found himself documenting impressive shooting rather than the disaster he had anticipated. This is exactly opposite of what everyone expected, he admitted to nearby soldiers. We came to watch someone fail spectacularly. Instead, we're witnessing professional competence that most of us will never achieve. The afternoon sun continued its arc across Range 7, providing optimal lighting for the continued demonstration of precision shooting that had surprised every observer. The largest audience in the range's history maintained respectful attention as exceptional marksmanship capabilities continued being displayed. She prepared for her 9th shot with the same methodical precision that had characterized every previous engagement. The Barrett M82-01 responding to her handling like familiar equipment rather than challenging weaponry. The sights suggested extensive experience with advanced systems that exceeded obvious appearances. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached the firing line with official authority, his presence commanding immediate attention from the gathered soldiers who had witnessed nearly an hour of exceptional marksmanship. The demonstration had evolved far beyond routine training exercise into something that warranted direct command investigation and recognition. She completed her 10th consecutive precision shot before acknowledging Morrison's approach, the Barrett M82A1 settling smoothly into battery position after another flawless engagement. The weapon had performed perfectly under her experienced operation, each round demonstrating capabilities that had impressed every observer present. "Soldier," Morrison said formally, stepping into position where she could hear him clearly while maintaining appropriate military protocol. "Your demonstration today has been exceptional. I need to ask some questions about your background and training credentials." The official tone indicated serious command interest rather than routine inquiry. The gathered audience of 70 soldiers fell silent as they sensed the approaching climax of an afternoon that had completely overturned their expectations. Torres gripped his chair arms while Martinez stopped his documentation to focus complete attention on the unfolding conversation between the operator and senior command. Peterson maintained his range control position while observing the official interaction, understanding that the situation had escalated beyond routine equipment checkout into something requiring command attention. His range logs would provide official documentation of capabilities that exceeded standard personnel qualifications. Morrison consulted the documentation folder that contained her training records and certifications, credentials that had taken on new significance given the professional competence being witnessed. "These qualifications are impressive," he noted, "but they don't fully explain the level of expertise you've demonstrated today." Master Sergeant Jackson positioned himself within hearing range of the conversation, recognizing that command was pursuing answers about training backgrounds that weren't immediately apparent from standard personnel records. The demonstration had revealed capabilities that suggested specialized programs or unit assignments. She remained in shooting position while responding to Morrison's inquiry, her attention divided between the conversation and continued range operations. The Barrett required constant monitoring for safety purposes, and her professional focus impressed observing soldiers who noted the multitasking capability. Staff Sergeant Williams gathered his expanded training audience for continued observation of what was becoming an official command investigation rather than routine marksmanship demonstration. "Watch how she maintains weapon control while engaging in conversation," he instructed. "That's advanced operator discipline." Morrison's radio received another inquiry from Base Command requesting updates about the situation at Range 7. The exceptional shooting had drawn attention throughout Fort Braxton's leadership structure, with multiple offices seeking information about the unprecedented demonstration being reported. "I need to understand your operational background," Morrison continued, his tone carrying official weight that indicated serious investigation rather than casual curiosity. "The capabilities you've demonstrated suggest training programs that aren't reflected in standard personnel files. Where did you acquire this level of expertise?" Hayes found himself studying the interaction between command and operator with growing professional interest. The conversation suggested backgrounds that exceeded obvious appearances, possibly involving specialized assignments or classified training programs that weren't immediately apparent to casual observation. Private Thompson documented the official investigation that was unfolding, recognizing that the situation had evolved beyond training demonstration into something warranting command attention. His footage would provide evidence of capabilities that had surprised experienced personnel throughout the installation. The Barrett M82A1 remained ready for continued operations while she engaged with Morrison's inquiry, the weapon system representing advanced capabilities that had exceeded every observer's expectations. The rifle had performed flawlessly under her experienced control, demonstrating precision that impressed professional marksmen. Rodriguez whispered to nearby soldiers about the command attention being focused on the operator. "This is getting serious," he noted. "LTC doesn't investigate routine shooting unless there's something special about the person behind a rifle." We might be dealing with someone whose background involves classified operations. Morrison examined additional documentation while maintaining his investigation, searching for credentials that might explain the exceptional competence being witnessed. Advanced schools, specialized training programs, qualification courses that indicated extensive investment in marksmanship development beyond standard military education. Staff Sergeant Chun observed the unfolding investigation with recognition that the situation involved more than routine personnel management. Command interests suggested backgrounds that might involve security considerations rather than standard training oversight. The demonstration had revealed capabilities worthy of official attention. She maintained professional composure while responding to Morrison's questions, her demeanor suggesting familiarity with command scrutiny rather than nervousness about official investigation. The confidence impressed observing soldiers who noted the calm response to high-level attention. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's investigation continued with questions that reflected growing command concern about operational backgrounds that weren't immediately apparent from available documentation. The demonstrated capabilities suggested training levels that might involve specialized programs or unit assignments requiring security clearance. The gathered audience maintained respectful attention while witnessing what had become an official command investigation rather than entertainment demonstration. 70 soldiers observed the interaction between senior leadership and an operator whose capabilities had exceeded everyone's expectations throughout the afternoon. Private Lewis documented target assessment that confirmed sustained accuracy despite the distraction of command investigation. 10 shots, 10 hits, all precision placement, he announced quietly. Maintaining that performance while engaged in official conversation demonstrates advanced operator discipline. Master Sergeant Jackson recognized that the situation was approaching resolution as Morrison's investigation intensified. The command interest suggested that answers were forthcoming about training backgrounds that would explain the exceptional capabilities being witnessed at Range 7. Morrison stepped closer to the firing position, his voice carrying official authority that commanded complete attention from everyone present. "Soldier," he said formally, "I need you to identify yourself completely. Your demonstrated capabilities suggest backgrounds that require official recognition rather than routine personnel oversight." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Range 7 as the most observed shooting demonstration in Fort Braxton's history approached its climactic moment. 70 soldiers waited for answers that would explain the exceptional marksmanship they had witnessed throughout an afternoon that had completely overturned their expectations. Torres felt anticipation building as Morrison's investigation approached its conclusion. "We're about to learn who she really is," he whispered to Martinez. "This whole afternoon has been leading up to this moment." The identity revelation would explain everything they had witnessed. She prepared to respond to Morrison's direct inquiry about her identity and background, understanding that the demonstration had drawn official attention that required complete disclosure rather than routine training oversight. The moment of revelation had finally arrived after an afternoon of exceptional marksmanship that had surprised everyone present. She set the Barrett M82A1 into safe position and turned to face Lieutenant Colonel Morrison directly, her movement commanding absolute attention from the 70 soldiers who had gathered to witness what had become the most significant demonstration in Fort Braxton's recent history. The moment of revelation had finally arrived after an afternoon of exceptional marksmanship. "My call sign is Black Falcon, sir," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent range with unmistakable authority. The words struck the gathered audience like physical blows, each syllable carrying weight that transformed every assumption they had made about her identity and capabilities. Morrison's expression shifted immediately from curiosity to recognition, his face displaying the shock of someone who had just realized he was speaking to a legend rather than an unknown soldier. "Black Falcon," he repeated slowly, his voice carrying reverence that indicated complete understanding of what that call sign represented. The silence that followed her revelation seemed to stretch across Range 7 like a physical presence, 70 soldiers processing information that redefined everything they had witnessed throughout the afternoon. Torres felt his chair arms slipping from nerveless fingers as the magnitude of the situation became clear. Black Falcon was a name whispered in military circles with the kind of respect reserved for operators whose capabilities exceeded normal human limitations. Stories circulated about impossible shots taken under impossible conditions, precision marksmanship that had changed the outcomes of critical operations in theaters across the globe. Rodriguez stared at the firing position with complete revision of every assumption he had made since morning. "We were watching Black Falcon," he whispered to Hayes in disbelief. "The Black Falcon, the most legendary sniper in active service." His voice carried the stunned recognition of someone who had just realized they had witnessed history. Master Sergeant Jackson stepped forward with a respect due to an operator whose reputation preceded her into every military installation worldwide. "Ma'am," he said formally, "it's an honor to have witnessed your demonstration today. Your capabilities are exactly what the story suggested, though seeing them firsthand exceeds every expectation." Morrison's radio crackled with renewed urgency as he contacted Base Command with information that would transform routine reports into significant operational intelligence. "Base operations, this is Morrison. I need to speak with the commander immediately. We have Black Falcon at range 7, and her demonstration today has been exceptional." The gathered soldiers began exchanging awed whispers as the magnitude of what they had witnessed became apparent. They had expected to watch an amateur struggle with advanced equipment. Instead, they had observed one of the military's most elite operators demonstrating why her reputation commanded respect throughout special operations communities. Staff Sergeant Williams turned to his squad with educational opportunity that would last their entire careers. "Men," he said solemnly, "you have just witnessed the finest precision marksmanship demonstration any of you will ever see. Black Falcon's capabilities are legendary throughout the military, and today you observed why." Private Thompson realized that his footage had captured one of the most significant training demonstrations ever recorded at Fort Braxton. The documentation would serve as premier educational material, showing techniques employed by operators whose skills exceeded normal human capabilities. Torres found his voice after several moments of stunned silence. "We spent the morning making bets about watching her fail," he said to Martinez with obvious embarrassment. "Instead, we were privileged to witness Black Falcon demonstrating why she's considered the finest sniper in active service." Peterson completed his range documentation with records that would become historical rather than routine training logs. His files would provide official verification that Black Falcon had conducted operations at Range 7, demonstrating capabilities that confirmed every story told about her legendary marksmanship. Hayes lowered his binoculars with complete understanding of why the morning's equipment request had seemed so confident despite apparent mismatches. The Barrett M82A1 wasn't challenging equipment for her. It was standard issue for an operator whose capabilities demanded the finest precision weapons available. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison approached her position with the respect appropriate for addressing one of the military's most elite operators. "Ma'am," he said formally, "Fort Braxton is honored by your presence. If there's any support you require for your operations here, please consider it immediately available." The afternoon sun cast golden light across Range 7 as 70 soldiers processed the revelation that had transformed routine entertainment into historic opportunity. They had witnessed Black Falcon demonstrating the capabilities that had made her name legendary throughout military communities worldwide. Staff Sergeant Chun gathered his unit members for reflection about the privilege they had experienced. "Today you observed perfection in military marksmanship," he told them seriously. "Black Falcon's demonstration will serve as the standard by which you measure excellence throughout your entire careers." She began securing the Barrett M82A1 for transport, her movements watched with reverence by soldiers who now understood they were observing an operator whose skills exceeded normal human limitations. Every gesture carried the authority of someone whose reputation commanded respect globally. Private Lewis called out final target assessment with voice that carried appropriate reverence. 10 shots, 10 perfect hits, all precision placement at extreme range, he announced. Black Falcon has demonstrated why her capabilities are considered legendary throughout special operations communities worldwide. Rodriguez found himself completely humbled by the recognition of how wrong his assumptions had been. We questioned whether she could handle the equipment, he admitted to nearby soldiers. Instead, we discovered that we were watching the person who defines what handling advanced equipment actually means. Morrison's radio transmitted updates to Base Command about the exceptional demonstration that had occurred at Range 7. The information would filter through military networks, confirming that Black Falcon had conducted operations that validated every story told about her legendary capabilities. The gathered audience began dispersing with understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary rather than routine training exercise. 70 soldiers carried stories that would be told throughout their careers about the afternoon they watched Black Falcon demonstrate, why her name commanded respect globally. If you enjoyed witnessing this incredible story of hidden expertise and earned respect, drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or share if you've ever encountered someone whose true capabilities completely surprised you. Torres gathered his equipment with newfound respect for the morning's events at the armory. Castellanos wasn't being unreasonable, he realized aloud. He just didn't recognize that he was dealing with Black Falcon. Her credentials weren't questionable after all. They were extraordinary. The Barrett M82A1 disappeared into its transport case, the weapon having served as the instrument through which Black Falcon had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every observer's expectations. Range 7 returned to routine operations, though it would never again seem quite the same to those who had witnessed perfection. Master Sergeant Jackson made final observations about the historic demonstration that had occurred under his watch. Today, soldiers, you observed why some operators achieve legendary status, he announced to the remaining audience. Black Falcon's capabilities represent the absolute pinnacle of military marksmanship excellence. As the afternoon concluded, Fort Braxton buzzed with stories about the revelation at Range 7. The soldier who had been ridiculed for her equipment request had proven to be the most elite sniper in active service, demonstrating capabilities that would be discussed throughout the installation for years to come.